Hello, this is Frank DeFreitas, and welcome to another week of HoloTalk for the week of March 26th, 2000. I'm in the studio, and Michelle Roy is with us again this week. Hello, Michelle. How are you?
I'm good, Frank. How are you?
I'm doing great. We're going to bring you the second show in a series of 5 shows that we recorded when we were out in Long Island City, New York, at the Center for the Holographic Arts. And today's guest is Dan Schweitzer. And Michelle, you did the interview with Dan, and I just had a chance to edit it and listen to it. It's a great interview.
Oh, thanks. I was just sitting here trying to remember what we talked about. I remember having a good time with the interview.
Yeah. Thanks for tuning in. I guess we'll just move right on to the show because
Wait, you can't think of anything else to say?
I can't think of anything else to say. Why don't you say something?
Well, I think the show pretty much speaks for itself. It was a good show. We had fun. Lots of laughing, which is always good, I think, in the show.
Yeah.
And that's it.
That is it. All right, here's the show. Don't forget to tune in each and every week, and we'll have the third show in this series next week. So thanks for tuning in to HoloTalk. See you next week.
I thought you were doing Mary.
No, we're doing Dan.
Yeah.
Well, the reason why we're doing Dan is we did Anna Maria Nicholson last week, who is one of the directors and founders.
Oh, sure. Okay, that makes sense.
And even though time-wise, Mary was the second person we interviewed, I figured show-wise it might be good to do Dan because he's the co-director, co-founder.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. You just didn't let me, I wasn't in on the thought process there.
Oh, so I see.
That was, once you explain it to me now, it makes sense, and I'm with you on that one.
All righty.
But,
So I'll go over now and...
Now you can turn this off.
Okay. We're back at the show with Dan Schweitzer and Michelle Roy. And if you want to hear the interview that we did previously with Dan, just go right onto the archive page. And I think we have a show there that lasts about 40 or 45 minutes with Dan. So I'm not going to repeat some of the questions that I asked him during that show. So what I'm going to do is turn the microphone back over to Michelle Roy, who wants to ask Dan a few questions about how to get involved with holography. And, well, she'll be better to ask those questions than I can to be able to tell you. So here she is.
Especially the way you're talking right now. I think Frank's been hitting the wine over. At any rate, to return to the purpose of being here. Dan, what I wanted to talk to you first of all about was sort of your own interest and work in holography in terms of, what got you interested in doing this as a career, what, made you decide, this as opposed to being a professor. I don't know, anything, auto mechanics, exactly. What got you into this?
It's a serendipitous kind of experience. I think I mentioned in a prior interview with Frank that my involvement was really almost by accident. But once I got my first class in holography, it was the concept behind the recording process was so extraordinary, and it just appealed to my philosophical side as much as anything else, and the ability to do something that's never been done before. I mean, there is nothing more exciting than knowing that when you do something, no one has been there before.
Or a pioneer.
You feel like a pioneer,
right.
And when you begin, for me, science was always a very difficult field, and for the first time as an adult, I was able to apply scientific principles to something that created a visual image. Was extraordinary. So as I got more and more excited about the science, at the same time more and more excited about the image, and the two sort of evolved at the same time, and I found that I could express what I was learning in an artistic statement that had emotion behind it, that had the desire to communicate the excitement that I was having over discovering about science and light, because so much of what we know in our minds comes through our eyes. To break that down and to begin to understand how light behaves, and then to be able to turn it around and express it in some kind of a philosophical and or emotional statement was a remarkable combination of elements that managed to pry me away from my theatrical instincts.
So you actually began in another aspect of the arts, I guess, in drama. We talked earlier with Mary, who's a painter, as well as working in holography. Do you work in other media as well, or stick strictly to holography?
A lot of my work, actually, I had always had a side career of doing small sculpture work. it just interfaced very well.
I was going to say, I can see the connection.
Right, with holography, where I was able to use some of the work that I had originally done prior to even knowing about holography and incorporate that. There was also a link in there because I went from basically from doing theater to video to film, where I performed, but then back to video again with my partner Sam Murray with the New York Holographic Labs. We did a number of projects involved with video where we used a lot of our small sculptures to create abstract scenarios, if you will. And it turned out that the models lent themselves very well to the holographic frame, and so there was a logical step from one thing to another. And then that became another thing where the original sculptures I made holograms of, and then eventually the sculptures became exterior to the hologram and interrelate with the projected light images from the hologram. So that became sort of a little theater for me. So now I was in control of everything.
So you're a control freak, is that it?
Not exactly. I have none whatsoever.
You're an out-of-control freak.
I'm an out-of-control freak. Exactly. Thank you. I think I'll write that down. Put that on my resume.
Job title, out-of-control freak, which has a couple of meanings depending on where you put the emphasis in that. That's right. Now, we were talking earlier before we began the recording about some courses at the School for the Visual Arts. Can you tell us a little bit about those courses and what kinds of things you cover in those courses, what experiences students have during the course?
It's really a practical course. It is, as it stands right now at the school, it's an elective. It's not within the art department, but it takes a very curious person to make a selection like that from the school. And it's a matter of just bringing them from the very basic steps, single beam reflections, transmissions, in our first semester, up through image plane reflection type holograms, and then the advanced class deals in white light transmission holography. And that's where we are right now with the class. And so we're doing one-step rainbows, and it's so fortunate that we have this center here because we now have the pulse laser available to us. So a lot of the tedious problems that we often have with making master holograms can be alleviated by at least having a day out here where we can make masters out here. We combine those masters with the masters that we do on the isolation table at New York Holographic Labs, and we can come up with some pretty good results. But it's a matter of experimenting and letting them get curious and challenging them to use their creative instincts to try and capitalize on the medium. It's always a difficulty because it's new. They don't really know what is coming next until we do the shot. But once they see our first test results, then they can begin to design the works. And generally out of a class, we do come up with some pretty good results. Do
you find that the students struggle more with the, I shouldn't put it that way, that sounds so negative, but what's more of a challenge, the creative aspect of it or the technical aspect? When you look at painting or something like that, you may feel you have more control, if you will, but the technical aspect can seem difficult, I think, to people because they're not as familiar with it, maybe. Or is it not a challenge?
It's a twofold. It's very clearly a twofold challenge, as it is with any artist coming into the medium. You have a vision, you have an idea of what you think you'd like to do, but until you really begin to work with the medium, you're not really on firm ground yet. So when you see what's possible and what isn't, your vision will change. Ultimately you end up having to match your idea to what is possible in technology. And clearly, holography is not like the computer world. It's not very instant. You really do have to stay with it and master it. It's a bit of a stubborn beast sometimes. I'm thinking of marketing spurs for holographers.
Ride the wild hologram? Is that
take these spurs with you. But eventually you do come to terms with it, and sometimes some real genuine magic can happen.
Now, do you find that certain types of students seem to be attracted to the class as opposed to, since it is an elective? I know you mentioned earlier that you have to be a particularly curious kind of person, probably. But are there other things that you've noticed in the students?
Well, most of the students are photography majors. A lot of them are photography majors. So they have imagery in mind and they have content in mind. This is the age where people are pursuing things that they know are going to pay off economically. And so we're not in demand quite yet because what we do is not out there quite so much. So,
particularly when you're photography.
Right. What I stress with the students is that if you never make another hologram in your life after you finish with our classes, it doesn't matter. We're not teaching you to be a holographer. What we're trying to do is teach you a little bit about the process, the concept, the recording process, which is so remarkable. The holographic paradigm is very much a part of my rap in terms of teaching, because I believe that the way light behaves is a metaphor for the way life behaves in a lot of ways. And I think that you can learn lessons from holography that you might not learn using other media, that might have nothing to do necessarily with your career, but something to do with a way of thinking or a way of defining your own universe. And so I don't feel necessarily rejected if my students don't go on to become famous holographers, although many have, and I'm proud of that. Not that I've made them good. I just introduced them, as Frank can well testify to. You can start people, but you don't do it for them.
That's right.
You have to bring the stuff with you. But I think that there's a lot to be gained from holography, even if you don't really go into it as a career. Clearly, it would be great to be able to go into it as a career, but even if not, I think there's so much to be learned as a part of the process. If nothing else, discipline. You can't give up.
So do you think you need to come into it with discipline, or you learn that discipline and patience?
It teaches you discipline. For those people who grow up with a computer where it all happens right away, and actually it doesn't really do that, does it? No, you struggle with everything we work with. If you want to be good at something, you have to really apply yourself, and you have to be dedicated, whether it's a seemingly simple technology like computers or holography, which seemingly is high-tech, and as it turns out to be more like light plumbing.
Not supposed to say that.
We're all plumbers. I've been plummeting ever since. No, that's different.
Yeah, I was going to say plumbing and plummeting. Very different concepts. Well, I really appreciate you talking with us, Dan. I don't know, Frank, do you have any other questions?
I just wanted to say that was a great interview. And I want the HoloTalk listeners to write in and let me know, do you want me to stay with the show or do you want Michelle Roy to take over?
Oh, no.
No, I don't have any more questions. I rest my case.
That's right. All right. Thanks, Dan. Bye-bye.